First, let's go over baking in Maya. We can bake from the Transfer Maps window, found in the rendering mode, under lighting and shading, Transfer Maps. And I use this quite a bit, so I have a button on my shelf here. And this seems a little intimidating at first, but it's actually a really easy menu to use. You see here we have target meshes and source meshes. For most of what we're going to be using this for, which is baking normal maps, this basically means low polygon meshes for target meshes and high resolution meshes for the source meshes. So let's just load that in first. This is my low polygon model, add selected, and these are my high res models, add selected to source meshes. And then under output maps, by default it's like this, and you just want to click on normal. There are many different kind of maps that you can actually bake here, but for the time being we'll focus on normal maps. And you can change the destination of your file, change the target, and I'll just replace this one, staff normal.target. Include materials doesn't really matter for us because we're not really transferring any materials. One thing you want to make sure if you have on for a character model is to have tangent space. And for me, I use Maya common settings, have that on. If you don't, then you can specify map size here, but for us, since I'll probably be baking several times, I want them all to use the same settings, and so just keep on use Maya common settings. Under connect output maps, this is optional. If you leave it on, then it will automatically create a new shader or assign a shader that already exists, and it will connect the map to it. A lot of times I have this off, but for demonstration purposes here I'll leave it on. And what's going to happen is after I bake this, it'll make a new material and it'll set up everything for me, and it'll display the normal map on the low polygon model. Normally I just like to have a little bit more control over that process. Moving down to Maya common output, in the map size. Let's see, anything else? Transfer in. Okay, I have it on object space here for transfer in. Hopefully you know the difference between world space, object space, and UV space, but as a recap, in world space it would expect these models to actually be overlapping. So if I zero this out, then it would bake fine, but if I move it out here, then it wouldn't know how to search. I have this on object space because right now these are sharing the same, their zero transformations are at the same point here. So if I just move it over, then Maya will know that what I mean to do is bake it as if this object was at 0, 2. So that way I can bake this and have it still work even though this is offset physically right now. For sampling quality, you should keep things pretty low. I usually keep preview on, it's fine. Just make sure that your bake turns out right before you bump up the settings. For filter size and Gaussian, filter size and filter type, these are related to basically how sharp your normal map result is. Lower number for filter size means sharper, higher means smoother, and filter type, Gaussian being sharper and box being softer. Normally I don't even mess around with this. I like to have fairly sharp results on my normal map. And for fill texture seams, this is basically edge padding. What that means is on the outsides of your UV islands, what it'll do is it'll take the outside pixels that it renders and it will extend that all the way around the UV island. And that's just to make sure that you don't have any kind of mipping problems or anything like that. When the model is zoomed out, sometimes there's some imprecision in how the textures display, and so sometimes you can appear to have like a seam or a line along the UV borders. For me, I just leave it at 0 right now, and I will manually add that padding myself in Photoshop later. And the reason for that is because I kind of like having it match the UV borders exactly to begin with, just in case I need to. There's some other things I do later on in texturing that I feel like that's helpful for me, and this is such an easy thing to add later on that it doesn't really matter at this point. For ignore mirrored faces, this just means that if you haven't offset your UVs, and I talked about this in the previous video, but if you haven't offset the UVs, then turning this on will allow your normal map to render correctly. And if you have it off, then that assumes that you did offset any mirrored UVs. And flip U, flip V, we won't worry about that. And mental ray common output, I think this is more for AO and baking AO and things like that, but I never do that in Maya because Maya just bakes on the slow side, and I'd rather do that kind of thing in XNormal, so we won't worry about that. And under advanced options, you could change the way the search method works here, and this option for deleting envelopes on bake. If you let's see, let me turn on the envelope for a second here. If you look back up the target meshes here, you can see that it has some other options I didn't discuss before, and that is output UV set, map 1. That's fine unless you have multiple UV sets. You can change it here. And display right now is just the mesh, but you could change it so that it shows the envelope. And what the envelope is basically a duplicate of the mesh. And what Maya is going to do is it's going to cast rays from the envelope onto the low polygon model, onto the high polygon model, and it'll make the normal map based on that calculation. You can see it if I turn on both and I increase the search envelope, you can see that the envelope getting bigger. And what you kind of want is let me bring this back to the origin here, is you want to change this envelope so that it encompasses the high polygon model. As a general rule of thumb, that's kind of what you want to look for. If you have parts of the high polygon model sticking out, like for example if I lowered this significantly, maybe like 0.1, you can see the high polygon model showing through the envelope, and this is likely to cause some rendering problems. But what you also don't want to do is you don't want to make this so big that your envelope starts to crash into itself. That can cause some rendering problems as well. So you just want to find something that envelopes the high polygon model, but yeah, it doesn't conflict too much within itself. Now, sometimes finding this balance can be difficult if your model has a lot of really complex changes to the surface and you don't have enough geometry on your low polygon model to accurately match the surface. And in cases like that, what you probably want to do is make a cage, and that which brings me back down here for delete envelopes on bake. So this red mesh here, you can see it's actually created that mesh underneath my low polygon model. So if we had this on after I baked, what it would do is it would get rid of this envelope, and most of the time that's perfectly fine. But if you wanted to keep this around, like for example, if you wanted to edit this envelope yourself, which you can do if you have it selected, and you can move the vertices around to better match the shape of the high polygon model, then you probably want to keep that mesh around because you might need to use it again later. And if that's the case, then you probably want to uncheck this so that it doesn't delete the envelope. So with that said, with these settings, let's go ahead and run a bake. Oh, sorry, let me do that again. I have forgotten that I had intended to move it offset here, so you can see that the object space does work. Let's render it again. And now if I press 6 to go in texture mode, you can see that here's the normal map on it. I mean, this is a very low quality normal map, but it's good enough to look at and see if there are any errors going on. And then, if there are, we can make some tweaks and we can increase the settings to find a better result. One of the benefits to baking within Maya is that you can intuitively see how your meshes compare between the envelope and the high resolution mesh. So it's relatively easy to troubleshoot any rendering problems that you may have. The biggest drawback, of course, is that you are more limited by how dense your meshes can be. Maya simply wasn't designed to display millions of polygons the same way that a program like ZBrush was. So before exporting your high resolution mesh to another program such as Maya, you may have to reduce the number of polygons it has, but you want to do it in a way where you're not losing any detail. So in ZBrush, there's a feature built in these days. It used to be a plugin that you had to install manually, but it's called a Decimation Master, found under Z plugin. And what this does is it'll take your subtool and it will rearrange the geometry in a way where it basically retains pretty much all your details, but the resulting mesh has a lot fewer polygons. And the reason why it's able to do that is because if you look at the polyframe right now, you can see they are all quads, and I already did the decimation before, so if I just undo or redo, you can see that this is what the decimation did. It turned everything into triangles, and triangles are just a lot more efficient in how they can describe the shape of things. So if we turn off the the polyframe, you can see I'm going to toggle back and forth between, this is before the decimation and this is after. And this was set at 30% decimation. I think default is 20%, but you can see that it loses very little detail, but the mesh is a lot lighter weight, so it can be brought into Maya without any problems. To be perfectly honest, in a lot of game art, you rarely need many millions of polygons to create effective bakes. So I recommend decimating your meshes even if you don't need to bring it in to Maya or Max, because even just bringing it into XNormal, for example, it'll load faster, and the maps will just render in a way that it won't kill your machine. You should keep in mind that depending on the resulting texture size, a lot of the detail may be lost anyway. So, and what I mean by that is, if your texture was low res, or like I don't know, like a 512 or something, then if you think about the size of each pixel and what that one pixel can actually capture as far as detail, it might not even be able to get a lot of these really small things. So if there aren't enough pixels to capture it, then you might have to really think about, is it really worth it to try to make your high resolution mesh so high res and so detailed that that those kinds of details don't even transfer over. Keep your mesh density optimized to the task at hand, and your life will be easier. It's always going to be about finding a good balance between quality of how smooth everything is versus efficiency. So run your own tests and get a sense for how much detail you really do need. On some models, you might be able to create a lot of these smaller details through other means. On this model, I did try to sculpt a lot of the higher frequency details right onto the mesh, but depending on how much time you have, it might be more practical to kind of leave the sculpting to the larger shapes, the bigger forms, and then try to get some of this detail back at the texturing stage.